everyone. I want to welcome you to our Vision 2020 event showcasing Nanaimo 2020 and beyond. On behalf of our committee, I want to say a sincere thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our trade show presenters. We had 45 industry sectors presenting today, sharing what their greatest success in the last 5 years has been and what their vision for the future of Nanaimo looks like. So I want to say a big thank you to that group and a round of applause for them if we can. Before our first speaker comes up, I want to tell you a quick story about why we're here today. And it's that 5 years ago, a small group of us business people got together and talked about, just before a municipal election, about what the discussion at the election was going to be about. And we hosted a vision rally right here at this facility, and we had about 300 people show up to talk about what vision for Nanaimo looked like and define what that looked like. We considered that event a huge success for a couple of reasons. 300 people showed up. We changed the discussion of that municipal election. You saw our politicians talking about vision. You saw them go through a visioning exercise. You saw the Chamber of Commerce put together a successful cities document. So there was lots of positive things that came from that event. And our group thought we were done. We'd finished, we'd accomplished what we had set out to achieve. But about a year ago, some people approached us and said, so what's next? That can't be the end of the discussion. You have a discussion about vision, but you don't do any follow-up. And that was a challenge to us, and our group has doubled in size now. As you saw, there are 5 of us on the committee. And we started talking about all the different stories and things that had happened in the last 5 years. And there are amazing stories here, and you saw those in the trade show booths today, of things that are happening in Nanaimo. There's huge successes that are happening here, and we are very, very bad about telling each other about it and celebrating together. And so that's the basis for the event today. We met with industry sectors on February 17th earlier this year, and we had 20 groups tell us what their greatest success was and what their vision for the future was. That group of 20 became a group of 45 who you saw in the trade show booths today, and our speakers this evening who are going to talk to you about community and about what vision looks like and about growing community. And so we want to welcome our speakers this evening, Kerry Slavens and Dr. Burnett. They're going to be inspiring. We just had dinner with them, and they've got lots of very inspiring things to talk to us about today. So this event today is not the end of this. We'll be putting a document together at the end of today's session that will be going to City Council at the end of May, celebrating Nanaimo and talking about what our success and what our vision is as a community. So lots of hard work, but we think lots of fruitful results at the end of the day that you'll be able to see it in the form of a document and in the form of what Shaw is going to put on the air for us as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, who is Kerry Slavens. She's the editor-in-chief of Douglas Magazine, Vancouver Island business magazine. She displays a passion for championing the development of a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem on Vancouver Island. She's a frequent guest speaker, and many of us have already heard her speak in this past year at the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance Summit and at the Power Talks group. She's a regular guest at CFAX Cafe in Victoria. And previous to joining the Page One publishing team, Kerry co-owned Artemis PR and Design, an award-winning Victoria creative agency that served local, national, and international clients for 15 years. So let's welcome Kerry to Nanaimo.
All right. Well, hey, Nanaimo, how are you this evening? Yeah, I got to tell you, I picked the right day to be here. This city looks beautiful. It always does. And thank you so much for inviting me up here to take part in this incredible Vision 2020 event. You know, one of the biggest perks of being the editor of Douglas Magazine really is getting access to Vancouver Island's most creative, smart, driven, and sometimes crazy smart entrepreneurs, and to immerse myself in their entrepreneurial culture. As a business editor, and previously as a business owner, I really feel like I've had a front row seat to the entrepreneurial evolution that this island has been going through. And now, it's time to ramp it up all over the island. Not just Nanaimo, but Victoria, Comox, everywhere. We've got to ramp it up, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about this evening. We want to truly tap into our strengths, and we want to show them what we've got out there. So let's turn the entrepreneurial evolution into an entrepreneurial revolution. Oops. I don't know what I did. Well, we're just going to forget that. I can go with the technology, you know. So these days, it seems like everybody is actually enamored with entrepreneurship. They're buoyed up by stories of mega entrepreneurs like Richard Branson and Steve Jobs, and yeah, that programmer down the street who just got his app or her app #1 on iTunes. You know who I'm talking about. And we tend to value the story of self-made entrepreneurs, but the truth is that no entrepreneur really is an island. They don't do it alone. It takes a lot of guts, it takes hard work, it takes those 5-shot Americanos, and it takes all of that to raise a business. And it's a whole lot easier, and the odds are a whole lot more in your favor if your city is 100% behind you, laying the groundwork and cheering you on. That's what every entrepreneur needs. Steve Martin, the comedian, once said, "The secret to success is be so good they can't ignore you." To my way of thinking, that advice is good for entrepreneurs, but it's also good for cities who want to attract and they want to grow entrepreneurs. So be so damn good they can't ignore you. But it's not just about being good. It's also about the story you tell of how you're good and why you're good, so that you can attract the entrepreneurs, the investors, the customers, the visionaries, and the champions that you really want. And yeah, sure, you can do it in fits and starts. You can eke out your success, or you can make a concerted, united, driven effort to build a vibrant, dynamic entrepreneurial ecosystem and a story of your own that's easy to understand, compelling to listen to, and uniquely yours, uniquely Nanaimo's, or whatever city you're from. Stories have power. People remember stories. They don't remember facts and statistics. So, hey, Nanaimo, what's your story? I have a bit of a sense of it. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So I'm going to share with you tonight a few of my insights as an entrepreneur, as a business editor, about developing that entrepreneurial ecosystem that is so strong and so dynamic that they really can't ignore you. And I've got to say, from what I know about Nanaimo, it's not a city we should ignore. You know it. I know it. I know Nanaimo is far more than Vancouver's bedroom community. It's far more than Victoria's backyard. I mean, shame on anybody who thinks that. There's so much vibrancy going on here. I know that Nanaimo was originally built a lot on coal and forestry. My grandfather was a miner here, and honest to God, he was a union man. If he saw me talking at a business conference, I think he'd roll over in his grave. But here I am. And today, Nanaimo has an increasingly diverse economy with a burgeoning tech, manufacturing, and tourism industry. Plus, you've got a growing artisan market, maker movement. I know it's home here to amazing startups. You've got Cube, you've got seasoned businesses like Inuktitut, VMAC. You've got Bob Wall Contracting. Nanaimo stands on its own. It's clean, it's affordable, it's got a spectacular waterfront, a cruise ship terminal, and hey, guess what? I know you have a 500-ton smoking crane down there, for God's sakes, that supercharges your port's cargo capabilities. You've got a gorgeous main street, you've got growing food, beer, arts, culture, and you're close to everything that matters in nature. In short, I know that you've got the right DNA to grow and strengthen your own exciting entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that's what you're doing. So what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? There are really a lot of definitions. Some of them are very academic, and quite frankly, they're about as boring as porridge, so I'm not going to tell you those. I like to keep it simple. An entrepreneurial ecosystem is basically a frog pond for business. It's no different than any other ecosystem. Our globe is one, our continent is one, our forests are ecosystems. We have business ecosystems, and they play largely by the same rules as any ecosystem anywhere. So the concept came from a guy named James Moore, who introduced the idea back in 1993 in Harvard Business Review. Essentially, he said that each business is like an organism in a living system. To keep this system vital and healthy, each business cannot just be out for themselves. Instead, there has to be collective buy-in and collective effort to create a vibrant culture that is entrepreneurial. And we've learned that the hard way in Victoria, and we're still learning it. You can't do very well when your business community works in fiefdoms and silos. when it's segmented, when the sectors are disconnected and when business groups are disjointed, it doesn't work. Then you're eking out success. You're not really giving it rocket fuel. And that's why events like Vision 2020 are a great way to build entrepreneurial capacity. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I think is working in Victoria. It's not directly translatable to here, but we've really had to, like I say, learn our lessons the hard way. I give a lot of credit to our manufacturing industry there. I give a shout out here to John Jurisic, who's up here from Victoria. He just told me there are 242 manufacturing companies on Vancouver Island of 10 or more employees. 242. Wow. That's not even the little mom and pop shop with no employees. I give a lot of credit to that, and I give a lot of credit to Viatech and our technology sector in Victoria for lighting a spark that made us all see that Victoria really wasn't just newlywed and nearly dead. Viatech very smartly began navigating around the old bureaucracy, connecting our burgeoning tech industry with the arts community, the craft food industry, the beer industry. It talked to the makers and the mavens. It invited artistic culture to connect with tech. And what we saw from that was an amazing dynamic that then began spreading throughout the whole community. So you can see a sector can't stand alone with a moat around it. They saw that they needed to connect with the creative sector and to actually make entrepreneurialism a fun thing, something that people could get excited about. And it worked to a large degree. Technology is our #1 industry in Victoria, $4 billion a year industry that's home to almost 900 firms. It brings in well-paying jobs that in turn benefit other sectors in our society. There are other community champions who deserve a shout out. One of them in Victoria is Owen Matthews of a company called Wesley Clover. His firm began converting rundown buildings in the downtown core into amazing spaces, complete with, let me just say this, a helicopter from Ocean's 13, gondolas from Whistler, and VW vans that they use as meeting rooms within the very buildings themselves. These are cool buildings. Go visit if you're ever there. And what he did was that he invited the startups in and said, okay, we've got these buildings. I'm going to help you out. We've got space. We're going to fund some of you. And the companies that they funded were companies like EcoSec, whose first service contract was to provide the digital security fence for the NATO summit in Wales. So basically, anything that popped up on social media, they saw it on a map. They could report it, shut it down fast if it looked like a threat. A little company from Vancouver Island providing the digital security fence. That's pretty awesome. And Lamazoo, weird name, but this company has developed a 3D EduTech anatomy program for veterinary students, so universities no longer have to, or will no longer have to, pay for expensive labs and dissections. So what Viatech did, what Owen did, what people like John did, and what everybody there's doing is they're kind of creating a critical mass, and that critical mass is essential to building your entrepreneurial hub. And that's why often you'll see cities will pick a certain street or a district, and they'll start building that. It's because critical mass is where the energy is, and you get enough of it, and it begins to spread. Victoria's entrepreneur ecosystem grew also when a former medical supply CEO and angel investor named Peter Elkins co-founded the Capital Investment Network. The goal was to bring investors together in an organized group to make sure that we could funnel capital through to startups and scale-ups in the city. And it's really making a difference. They feel like they're suddenly on investors' radar. And yes, Victoria still has lots and lots of issues. Did you know we have 13 mayors? Yeah, that's 12 too many. But the past 5 years has brought a dynamic change of attitude and direction. We even now have a mayor and council who appear to, at least in our core city, get it by launching a business hub to help make doing business in Victoria easier. And let me tell you, it has not been easy for years and years. Finally, Victoria has also benefited greatly from our recent trade mission to San Francisco. And we had a subsequent reverse trade mission where delegates came to Victoria for a day of pitches, connecting events, and yes, beer. Are you picking up by now that craft beer is the great connector? I mean, really, you guys have no problem there.
The biggest effect of a strong entrepreneurial ecosystem on my community is that we seem to have found our entrepreneurial self-esteem. We are beginning to play from our strengths instead of apologizing for not being a bigger city like Vancouver or Toronto or Silicon Valley, or for being on an island, for God's sakes. Speaking of island, I recently had the honor of interviewing one of my business heroes, Kevin Roberts. Kevin wrote a book called Love Marks, all about branding, and he's chair of Saatchi & Saatchi, the world's largest advertising agency. When Kevin was in town to receive his honorary degree from UVic, he made time to sit down and talk with me. We talked about business ecosystems, and I asked him, how does an island on the edge of a massive continent, in Canada no less, create an entrepreneurial surge and make its mark? And Kevin told me about the edge theory. It's the idea that the evolution of any species comes from the edge of the species, not the murky middle where it's hard to push through and innovate. It's why frontiers are so entrepreneurial. Anywhere there's a frontier, there's entrepreneurs. And Vancouver Island, Kevin told me, is a frontier. It's that innovation edge. I mean, Vancouver Island, if you think about it, we're the edge of the edge of the edge here. So we have lots of innovation. And if we keep having great ideas, and if we support each other by creating not just citywide, but island-wide entrepreneur ecosystems, and if we focus on failing fast and recalibrating fast, and turning those ideas into reality with velocity, there is literally nothing in our way, but we need that healthy ecosystem. So Nanaimo, all signs show you've got the right DNA for all of this to happen. And to my way of thinking, you are already a successful city. It's not like you want to become a successful city, you're successful. But I think what you're doing is you're finding your new S-curve. And for anybody who doesn't know S-curve theory, it's kind of like you start at the bottom of an S and you start going up. And you gain success. And then you get to the, am I drawing it the right way? Then you get to the top of the S. And what do? If you don't have a new idea, the S starts going down and you fall off the S. So you need another S. And what Victoria needs, what Nanaimo needs, what Vancouver Island needs, we need our next S-curve. And that's where we're going. So your host here, you have some incredible events here. I love the Vancouver Island Economic Summit. I've attended it for 4 years. The summit is one of my favorite places, and what I love about Nanaimo is that people seem very open to connecting about ideas. You've got Nanaimo Economic Development Agency. I was talking to the new CEO, John Hankins, and he told me he moved here from Calgary because he saw Nanaimo as an exciting city, an up-and-coming city with tremendous potential. He gets it. You've got Startup Nanaimo and Square and Innovation Island and the Chamber and Vancouver Island University, amazing university. You've got all the important stuff that attracts innovators, investors, and talent. And judging by this conference, there's a huge will to take this city to the next stage and develop a unique entrepreneurial ecosystem. An entrepreneurial ecosystem is more than an economic development strategy or a policy enacted by government. It's an actual culture that deliberately fosters and supports innovation. So you can't legislate it into being. You have to all work together. And I would say that it has to be entrepreneurial driven for it to really get the legs it needs. You need the buy-in of the people who are going to be in the trenches doing the work, and it needs to be championed by community. It also needs a culture conducive to business. It needs cross-pollination between sectors, even those that are seemingly unrelated, like tech and arts. It needs visionary policies and leadership that supports entrepreneurship. I mean, for goodness sakes, let's get past the engine of the economy thinking that, has carried us so far. We need a new story. We need a new metaphor for doing business on this island. And the engine of the economy for small business just isn't cutting it anymore. Let's tell ourselves exciting new tales. We need availability of financing, angel investors, venture funds, not as a crutch, but as a shot of rocket fuel at just the right time. We need quality talent. We need venture-friendly markets for products. We need the universities and colleges, and boy, we've got them. And we need vibrancy. Because all those people that want to come and live here, what they're really telling us, at least in Victoria, is they want a livable city. So guess what's popping up in Victoria finally? Bike lanes. I mean, you know, there's a whole little cultural sectors happening. There's the Ministry of Culture that has opened up a little pop-up shop. And all of these things stimulate creativity. But it's important to say in this that a lot of this was based on the Silicon Valley model, and no city should ever aspire to be Silicon Valley. They have their own unique ecosystem there, and what works there won't work for us. We can admire them, we can learn from them, but we need to tap into our own powerful resources to figure out what really makes us unique. So we can look to and take inspiration from cities like Portland, which has done an incredible job of building its brand for earthy innovation, or Reno, Nevada. Remember when everybody used to go gambling there? Well, they stopped. And so Reno had to really look at how do we attract tech and manufacturing. Look at Austin, Texas, once considered too remote for a successful startup community. Now it's a tech frontier leader and home to South by Southwest, the film, music, and interactive festival with a $200 million plus economic impact. So to end, I'd like you to all take a page from Brad Feld, author of Startup Communities and something called the Boulder Thesis. He was really one of the forerunners of talking about startup hubs and communities. And what he said, very briefly, is give before you get. Consider everyone a mentor, young, old, new to entrepreneurialism, experienced. Embrace weirdness. Think about that for a minute. How do we really get our ideas to thrive when we say, oh, that's too weird for us, you know? Oh, you know, we don't want to have a building that looks like that. Embrace weirdness. Just say, why don't we try it? Be open to new ideas and be wary of hierarchies. When someone suggests something, the immediate reaction is usually to figure out why it won't work. So let's figure out how to say, awesome, go do it. Nanaimo has a unique chance now to shape its destiny and to tell that compelling story that only Nanaimo can tell. You can feel the energy here. You can see the talent and the innovation. You know this is a place where incredible things are happening and more great things are possible. And thank you for welcoming me to Nanaimo. I love this city, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. That was very inspirational and dynamic. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Kerry later on, and there will be an opportunity for questions later on from the audience. I'd like to ask Dr. Ralph Nielsen with Vancouver Island University to come up and please introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Donna. It's a real honor to be here tonight. Before I start, I just want to recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo people and appreciate the years of history that they've provided to support us in such a welcoming place, because certainly that's their ethos, and it lives well in this community. I also want to just say how much of a pleasure it is to be here tonight to introduce Ron. Ron Burnett's a guy that's been around a long time. Doesn't look it when you get up here and you hear him talk, but he's been around a long, long time. When you see this guy, he's the longest running university president in British Columbia, 20 years. So he's got 20 years. He's 96, he started at Emily Carr. Now he's here in 2016, he's still going strong. He's also the longest running president in Canada of a university. So whenever he comes around to these national meetings we go to, and we're going to be at one next week in Toronto, he's kind of the wise old owl that sits in the corner and pontificates, and everybody comes to listen to him. So when you hear him tonight, you know, it's important for you to understand that he is very wise. But the other thing you've got to understand about him, many times if you think somebody had that much experience and that much time, you know, under their belt, they would be sitting in the corner, they would be pontificating, they would be expecting people to listen to him. And while Ron engages in conversation extremely well, he's also somebody that pushes change. He's constantly looking to the future, and he's constantly pushing against the status quo. It's not acceptable just to sit back and wait and everything will come. So if you think about Ron in Vancouver, many of you have been to Emily Carr, many of you have been to Granville Island, and you've seen that university there. It's been there a long time. Well, what Ron's involved in now is he's going to scrap that whole campus, and they're spending $130 million to build a new campus in a completely different location. Just think how faculty feel, how staff feel, how everybody that's gotten comfortable around that place feel. It's no more. So what happens in that kind of case? How do you manage that kind of change? How do you push against the kind of resistance that exists when you come up with a big, bold idea of making this thing special? Because Emily Carr is a unique institution in British Columbia. It's a provincial university, but then you take it nationally, and you look at the quality of the faculty, and you look at the quality of the students that are coming out of there, and the awards that they're winning on an annual basis, and the recognition that they're receiving for this province. And it doesn't happen unless you've got strong leadership, and you've got somebody that's willing to push against the common expectations of let's just relax now. So I'm very, very pleased to have Ron here. You've got his bio, and you can see all the awards that he's got, and they're all well-deserved. Order of Canada, very, very special for all of us in Canada. But the one that I think is really interesting, he's a knight of arts and honors in France, and so we get quite excited when he comes to our meetings dressed in his knight outfit. You know, no, he hasn't done that yet, but we're waiting for that time. But as you go through the list, he's being recognized constantly and internationally on a regular basis because he raises difficult questions, because he pushes the envelope, and because he constantly recognized that collectively, when we get together and talk about things and push things, we can really do some wonderful things. And exactly kind of leadership that he's providing to Emily Carr and indeed across the country. So I'm very, very proud to have Ron here. Martha's with him as well. Martha sitting with Ron there. And please, tonight, if you get a chance to question him, please do. Afterwards, get a chance to talk to him. Both of them very, very enlightening and wonderful experiences to share with us tonight. Ron, thank you.
Okay, after that introduction, I'm leaving. See ya. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to Dawn and her wonderful committee. We had a lovely dinner talking about many of the issues, I think, that have been raised by our previous speaker, a great speech. I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of stuff that relates and doesn't relate. Some of it weird, some of it less than weird, some of it true, some of it perhaps a bit of fiction. I tell stories. I'll tell you a story to begin, and I put up this slide because that's where we are with the campus build-out. We're at 40%. So that's what it looks like actually just a few days ago. And I'll talk a bit about the campus near the end, but I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about this startup culture that we're, all of us involved in education are witnessing with your children or grandchildren. There's a second-year student who emailed me and said, "I need your help, Dr. Ron." They call me Dr. Ron. I have no idea where that came from. The students all say, "Hi, Dr. Ron," and I don't take myself seriously enough to take that seriously, but they do. And, "Hi, Dr. Ron, I need to just talk to you for a few minutes because I'm in second year, but I've just started a new company." I thought, second year. I'm Indo-Canadian. I live in Surrey, and this company is going to be a great success, and I just need your help. So I've been emailing back and forth with her. I won't get into the details of the company because she is so proprietary about her idea that I would break confidence. However, what was astonishing to me, and is part of something that we need to understand really quite profoundly, is that this generation that she represents is extremely interested in determining their own lives in their own way. Extremely interested in defining their futures in a completely different manner, completely non-linear way, compared to how many of us got into our jobs, and many of us, including myself, staying far too long in our jobs. These people, these young adults, are seeking solutions to problems that they feel are urgent, and they're seeking those solutions through an entrepreneurial, innovative, technologically savvy, and worldwide approach. So when you talk about Nanaimo, and it is a place that one can't help but love, we have to talk about it in a global context. And I'll come back to that as I go through some of these slides and try and begin to situate how you actually think about innovation. I'm going to talk to you about a variety of issues related to what you need to do if you're actually going to learn to be entrepreneurial, and what kind of skills you need for the economy that we're building, which we are building in BC, notwithstanding some outrageously poor policy that is coming to us out of government at the moment. But I will talk to you also about the skill set, the kinds of skills, the very concrete skills that I think are necessary for us to be able to move forward. I'll talk to you about knowledge and how knowledge and the economy come together, but I'll start with another story. The chair you're sitting on happens to be a chair that was actually originally designed in the 17th century. So you're sitting on something that's 400 years old in terms of design. Many of you are wearing clothes using textile methods that are 300 to 500 years old. You live inside this rather wonderful space that is designed, and you don't know that it has been, because you don't see the artists or the designers that have done it, made it, created it. And because you don't see it, you kind of take it for granted. You like a nice looking car if you're a guy, but you don't actually want to know that there was a car designer that made it. If you know, the issue that we grapple with at Emily Carr on a continual basis is not that we have many ideas, we have millions. It's not that, that the ideas are necessarily connected or disconnected to the future. The thing that we grapple with the most is the lack of awareness of how involved we are with culture. So I'm going to talk to you about that. We live and breathe culture every day. We live and breathe who we are. We see ourselves, we identify ourselves through cultural mirrors and through cultural screens and through cultural windows. You've seen this before, but I feel like I need to play it.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
You've seen it. In fact, you might even feel a little bit of nostalgia about it. And you know, it's quite manipulative. It's really good marketing. Apple understands marketing. Apple, by the way, hires many students from Emily Carr. I'll get back to that. So what is it about innovation that is different? What is it about thinking differently? How do you get to that point? How do you actually become inspirational enough in your own sense of who you are and where you want to go so that you actually have an outcome that is new, that you actually do something different? So what I'm going to do is run through a number of slides here that begin to explore these issues from a number of different perspectives. But I did want to show you something from your own community. So I'm not going to talk at length about this vision. It's too small to see anyway, which is unfortunate. It's banal. It's got all the right words. It's the classic consultant's template. You know, you just put all the right words in, and everything looks like it has vision. Vision is about passion. When I first arrived at Emily Carr, the first thing that I was asked by everybody there, what's your vision? I said, I don't know the institution. Could you ask me in a year? No, what's your vision? What's your vision? That's probably something, if you're a younger person and you go looking for a job, you're going to be asked very, very early on, what's your vision for the position that you're interested in? There's a presumption that vision is something you can actually activate very easily and very quickly. It's false. Vision is actually a combination of things, and most importantly, and absolutely most importantly, it's about intuition and passion. And so this type of thing exists across Canada, across the United States. It's what I call McKinsey negative, or alternately, whatever other company does it. And I really don't want to insult any consultants here. I apologize if I do. I'm the kind of person when my HR director says, we're going to have a retreat and we're going to have a facilitator, and I start to get creepy, crocodile feelings in my blood, because you know, I believe that people, when they get together and they start talking, if they're honest and passionate and involved, that they'll find the measure of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they'll actually begin to talk. And I hate being told, this is how you're going to talk and this is what you're going to talk about. So if you want to have a discussion about this off this stage, I'll gladly talk to you about it. I hate that whole world. So what is this world that we're talking about? What are the new expectations that we have, that our children have, that our grandchildren have? This new world of work, what are the expectations that govern it? How do we actually begin to understand those expectations? How can we create environments? And I thought that what Kerry did was fantastic, because she's talking about facilitating those environments that will make it possible for people to innovate. Innovation, by the way, is the most overused word in the history of the English language. If you again go for a job and you say, "I am not an innovator," goodbye. It's overused. Innovation comes from something very, very profound again. It comes from wisdom and knowledge and time. You don't become innovative just by snapping your fingers. I'm fond of saying that artists are often viewed in a kind of archaeological sense as epiphanous. So you know the old story. I'm sort of trundling along and I come to my vision, and once I have my vision, I have my epiphany. It's quite religious, actually. I have seen the light, therefore I paint. It's this notion that inspiration comes from a place that is almost religious, epiphanous. Inspiration comes from hard, really, really hard work. And anyone that has been involved in a creative sector, anyone that's been involved in creating anything, from a business, by the way, right through to a painting, knows how much hard work it takes. So innovation is way overused. But I think the thing that interests me is the word at the bottom of this slide, disruption. The notion that work is increasingly collaborative is not a minor change in how we actually see work. The idea that work could be individual was a mistake. And it still exists today. They're highly specialized individuals. We need them. You know, we want the pilot to focus on being a pilot and not listening to Slacker radio. He does that anyway. But this notion of collaboration, which is at the core of the new forms of work that we're seeing, is part of what entrepreneurship is actually grounded in. It's grounded in breaking down the silos between disciplines, between modes of thinking, between modes of working. And I think what's fascinating about that is how disruptive it is. And I'll give you a good, very concrete example in the Emily Carr campus build-out. We have tons and tons of offices that are open in the architectural and design sense. And our faculty are in open rebellion against this. I want my cubicle. As Ralph knows, the standard in British Columbia for offices is a cupboard. And I have no idea when those standards were established, but for new buildings, the standards are a cupboard. And so we have decided not to have cupboards. It's disruptive because the silos break apart, the individuality of that situation begins to fall apart. You begin to think differently and you begin to think innovatively about your partners around you, and you begin to collaborate. So for me, one of the key elements of the new economy that we're building, and I think it's quite extraordinary how rapidly it's happening, and some of the examples from Victoria are interesting, is that without collaboration, you just cannot succeed. The other thing that is really interesting around collaboration is how profoundly it changes that ecosystem that Kerry was talking about. Because ideas are bounced off each other. I was down in Silicon Valley, and there's a very large accelerator called Rocket. It owns so many buildings in downtown San Francisco now. It doesn't have to be an accelerator anymore. It can just be an owner of buildings. And the guy was giving us, because Americans, I hope there are no Americans here, Americans tend to proselytize quite aggressively about their successes. He was giving us his success story. And he was pounding away with a kind of like rhythmic, it was almost like a song. And you gotta do this, and you gotta do that, and then you're gonna make it, You just go ahead, you're gonna make it. And I stopped him and I said, "What did you study at university?" He went like that and he said, "Linguistics, why?" What's so interesting about that example is, if we were to follow the logic of the old economy, what we would say is we have to train people in startup. We have to train entrepreneurs. You can't train entrepreneurs. What you can do is you can create a context in which people can actually discover for themselves which ideas work and which don't. You can give them every possible way in which those discoveries can be fundamentally life-changing or failures. You can actually set up the context, invest in the people, and give them the opportunity to try their best, but you can't make them. It's one of the greatest fallacies in the educational system. Ralph has heard me say this at meetings, that we can actually train people. Training, by the way, I hate that word. Training comes out of military notions of moving from A to B to C along a line that you can understand at the beginning and understand at the end. Ralph and I spent a lot of time talking about outcomes. If I say to you that outcomes are a very difficult thing to predict, would you agree or not? How many of you actually knew what you were going to be when you were 19? Some of you. A small minority, 2 or 3. And if you ask the question in a very fundamental way today, the expectation is that we're supposed to know when we're in high school what we're going to be when we get to university and what we're going to be when we finish university. By the way, forget about the 4 years of university, which are sheer existential hell, as you go through everything from sexual awakening to sexual deadness. Forget about all the trials and tribulations of teachers who don't care and teachers who do care and administrators who are completely divorced from what you're experiencing. Forget about all that. Just become something. Quickly, by the way, and the quicker the better. So this notion of the new economy is very dependent on a fundamental change in attitudes. And one of them is to understand that students by themselves are getting together and collaborating beautifully. We're just creating a space for them to do it in. So this is a phrase that's taken from the BC Business Council, that we're going through one of the greatest transformations in demography, which means I'm on my way out. Us poor boomers, we're really going to go screaming and crying. We don't want to leave. But the issue of the demographic shift is true and real. This society will be a society that will have to support us on very little money. And that's unfair, and it's actually wrong. So I'm starting a group, Ralph, of boomers that will support themselves. The issue here is the transformational impact of change and how we manage it. How do you learn how to manage change? I love what Kerry did because she chose the rousing speech. Go Nanaimo. Sports metaphor at work, Kerry, brilliant. Like really good. And I think that's great. All of you should feel rah-rah, you're the best place in the world. Transformation, by the way, starts with depression, with the recognition of weakness. It doesn't start from the recognition of strength. That's not a criticism. It starts with recognizing where the weaknesses are and how you can create a context to strengthen them. One of our greatest weaknesses is that our economy is, that our people are aging more rapidly than our economy is growing, and that we are going to be in a demographic crisis, and that we need to think completely differently. So the first thing I'm doing is getting a robot. It's not that funny, it's true. Jibo.com, Jibo.com, look it up. That's my robot. And why am I getting a robot? It seems logical to me. As I age, I'm going to need more help than my wife can ever provide. So transformation is about fundamental changes in the way we see, talk, and experience the world. It's not just about incremental shifts. And it's very hard to create context in which those transformative effects can properly be managed and properly envisioned and properly structured. And I'll come back to that point in a moment as well. So this is a really good way of beginning to think about some of the issues. I like this chart a lot. Clearly, the notion that life is 100 plus is somebody being very optimistic. Nonetheless, people do live a great deal longer than they ever have. That has an impact on the planning that you engage with on an economic level. It's really a serious issue. It's not about how many people will live how long, it's about how productive people will be for how long. That's big, because there was never an associated relationship between productivity and age in this fashion. And so as we move further and further down that demographic road, it'll change in the 2030s and late early 2040s. But as we move further and further down that demographic road, we need structures, we need systems, we need institutions, we need facilitation, and we need transformation. We need ways in which we can interact that will actually take that and make it work. And I might add, by the way, that what our children are doing in the DIY cultures that they're generating are a fantastic way of thinking about a solution. And I'll come back to that also in a moment. But what I'm really interested in is the one that says lifelong career and a job every 4 years. It's actually even more severe than that. A recent survey done in the United States found that people between the ages of 18 and 44 were shifting around every 6 to 8 months. They were moving their jobs, they were moving from one job to another very, very quickly. Why? In general, they were dissatisfied with the experience of the work that they were engaging in. They were not feeling, the survey began to explore their relationship to their futures. They were not feeling the future was visible and present to them. And that's a shared responsibility of any community, is to actually make and facilitate for its younger people the sense that the future is actually there. It can be achieved. And the other one that's really interesting here is the education, one-time education ongoing. As many of us know in the educational system, it's lifelong learning. It's about continuously learning more and more. The best thing that could happen is if a group of boomers would start running around creating companies, because there's a lot of experience there. Instead of thinking about retirement and whatever that may mean, they get involved in creating companies and creating jobs. They loop back and bring those people who are interested in the community along, irrespective of age, older or younger. Age is not the ultimate arbiter here. So this notion that lifelong learning, that the ways in which we do things together is changing, is profound. I think we're just beginning to look at and try and understand the implications of that. So the creative industries, I work in an institution that is devoted to culture and creativity. I'll show you a few slides of the new campus just to get you a bit excited about it. It's one of the largest investments in cultural infrastructure in BC's history, which is totally pathetic. We should be investing every day in cultural infrastructure, but I'll come back to that as well. The creative industries is an amazing, really intense part of our economy. I'll show you some figures about the creative sector that have circulated. And by the way, we're very far behind in our statistics right now. We're back in 2010. We don't have any current, because of the destruction of Statistics Canada, which was a silly idea. I don't know where that came from. We don't have up-to-date statistics, but I would imagine and I would assume, given the growth in the economy in percentage terms, that what we're looking at here is a larger sector than is actually available statistically. But if this is visible, it begins to give you a story of the core cultural industries that we're dealing with. A whole variety of different ways of building, stating, creating, making meaning, a whole variety of ways in which people get together to create new things. And most importantly, when I was recently down in Silicon Valley, which I visit often, I was quite amazed at how the artists that they're hiring, by the way, they're hiring artists, but why are they hiring the artists? They want a bit of a segue from the traditional linearity of the engineer, right? The engineer, bless them, really wants to go from A to B quickly, and they do it well. But what they need is somebody who's coming the other way and crashes into them and says, no, by the way, there's other ways of doing this. And that then creates a synergy that is really quite wonderful. Many of these industries here that you see are functionally interacting with the technology ecosystem that we're creating. In fact, I would argue that the technology ecosystem is dependent on culture far more than it ever has actually accepted. It's dependent on output that cultural agents and cultural producers actually make possible. And technology innovation has been driven largely by cultural innovation. They connect together all the time, everywhere. Whenever you look, you find them connecting. So here's the best example. Google starts a search engine. And what is that search engine but a two-dimensional graphic interface, a GUI? So they even use the word graphics. What is graphics? Graphics is the oldest artistic/design profession in human history. It's that first scratch on that first coin, whatever. So we're talking here about a core element of the best example of the new economy, completely dependent on one of the oldest forms that we ever invented. Typography. Gutenberg. All of these technologies, Gutenberg comes along. Gutenberg didn't come along to invent cars. He didn't care about transportation. He invented a way of printing books, which happened to change everything that we ever did at any point afterwards. So this intersection of culture and technology, deeply misunderstood, next book, make note, is a very, very profound issue. And it is an issue that is difficult to communicate because the tendency is to see culture at the periphery. It is, in a sense, to see the weirdness before you see the truth. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. These are some of the key areas here. And I put in software because I really think that it's an amazing failure not to understand how important software is to creativity. If you talk to programmers, they say, I'm not just a robot entering algorithms. An algorithm is an invention. That's why you can patent it. And an algorithm is a profound invention because it produces outcomes that are extraordinary, far, far beyond what its few lines may suggest, however opaque they may be. So software is part of that creative ecosystem. And learning how to code, which, by the way, we're slowly introducing to the students at Emily Carr, learning how to code is as important as learning how to write and read. I'm fond of saying that we still have all these programs that try to teach people how to speak and write English, but really what we're actually engaging with is a world where the language we use is multiple in so many different ways, be it from a different culture and also from a different technology. So here are some statistics. The GDP of cultural industries was $53.4 billion in 2010. I would imagine it's around 65 to 70 billion now. It's 3.4% of Canada's total GDP, more than mining and forestry together. So that's why Emily Carr has this wonderful statement all over the place on its posters that says, creativity is our greatest natural resource. That one really hit home because it's true. Because even those people, and I shouldn't say even, because I really respect people in mining and forestry. Actually, mining is a high-tech industry, by the way, so that's another discussion. But here's this large percentage of the GDP. That's direct GDP. If you actually begin to build the concentric circles around that, the supply chain, you're getting to 8% of the GDP. If you expand that into recreation and tourism, you're getting to 12% of the GDP. 12% of the GDP is centered on some form of cultural output or cultural production. You would not have Nanaimo today if you hadn't built this convention center, because this is a hub. You have to have places that people want to go, and I visited the Nanaimo Art Gallery, which is a wonderful place. If you want tourists, what are they going to do? They're going to say, oh, it's really beautiful here. What do we do now? Play golf? Okay, let's go play golf. What do we do now? Oh, let's go to the museum, or let's go to the gallery. Let's see what people are doing here. Let's converse, let's discuss, let's interact. The key to recreation and tourism is not to celebrate natural environments to the exclusion of the cultural. It's to celebrate the integration of the two and how they work together, and how a really great, healthy place also has a healthy culture attached to it. So in British Columbia in 2010, I apologize again, it's about 3% of our economy, but about 12% of the GDP in Canada, which is really interesting. And why is that? So it's because we actually happen to have a tradition in British Columbia of artists and designers that are among the greatest in the world. I'm not saying that lightly. Today, Jeffrey Farmer, a graduate of Emily Carr, is the Canadian representative at the Venice Biennale. Today, Emily Carr is the Canadian representative, along with the University of Montreal, at the Milan Triennial, which is being held for the first time in 16 years. And what is the Milan Triennial about? Industrial design. Do you know how many industrial design programs there are in Canada? 3. Do you know how many there are in Europe? 600. And why is that? Because we don't know what industrial design is. Industrial design is the fabrics of what you're sitting on. Industrial design is one of the greatest professions a student or a learner or an aging boomer could ever think of getting into. It's invention, it's technology, It's participation, it's community-based, it's collaborative. You can't do industrial design on your own. You have to do it with others. But why are there only 3 programs in Canada of any substance? I'll leave that for you to answer. And then the jobs. So that figure is probably about 1% down. So it's probably closer to 5% in terms of jobs in British Columbia. These are direct jobs. Again, not the supply chain, not all the things. You know, I'm fond of saying, because I get hassled a lot, why do you still have a painting department? Well, we have a painting department. How many of you would love to paint? See, this is a majority. Do you know that there's no audience I've ever talked to when I've said, would you love to draw and paint, that hasn't said, oh, why haven't I done it? Why? And you're all saying that now. Why haven't I actually bought that canvas and painted on it, even if it looks terrible? And it doesn't look terrible. But the issue is that at the end of the day, if you take painting and you take another discipline, you ask the question, why are people involved in what they're doing? You have to pull from what you know and become what you want to be without being told that that's what you're going to become because somebody else thinks that that's what you should be. Did you get that? I'm going to move on quickly here. So the creative economy is now understood in Europe in particular, but Australia as well, as contributing much more significantly to the economy than was ever understood before. In fact, it's so, the best statistic I have, which I didn't put up there, which I can tell you, is in Britain. When Tony Blair created the Ministry of Creative Industries, so it was a Ministry of Creative Industries. I don't think in Canada there's even the notion that you could try and create a Ministry of Creative Industries. It kind of doesn't work. I need an English accent to say it, I think. Anyway, he creates this Creative Industries Ministry, and the GDP in design, not in all the other areas, at that point was in the 1.2 to 2.2, they didn't have exact counts, billion pounds. Today, it's 28 billion pounds. It's such a significant arbiter of the difference between what they produce in England. Take the Dyson vacuum as your best example. The Dyson vacuum is a very powerful technological device that's designed to look beautiful. Because, by the way, it's actually fun to use because it's designed to look beautiful. I don't think any of you want to use stuff that is designed to look ugly. But we don't produce the designers that can actually get involved in designing the beautiful things because we only have 3 industrial design programs. So this creative economy, the minute that Blair applied this principle and said, you know, why are we not, we're good at this. And he was pushed by people like James Dyson and others. The GDP rose dramatically, and it kept on rising, and it continues to rise. And efforts that some of us have made at the federal level, perhaps this will change, to try and get a federal policy on this so that you can actually begin to open up, because my own belief is that we have not hundreds but thousands of students who would like to engage in this kind of work because it builds everything in. It takes the carpenter and says to the carpenter, you can do something in addition to what you do so well with wood. And so, by the way, I'll show you a slide of this fantastic project that we've developed with the Aboriginal people who come to Emily Carr. We have a lot of Aboriginal students at Emily Carr, and we support them as much as we can. We've developed a project where the goal is to generate a manufacturing industry for the north in British Columbia, because as Ralph said, we're a provincial university. It's carved doors. Carved doors. That's really high tech. What's really high tech is the fact that we're going to scan them, then we're going to CNC, cut them, and then humans, that is Aboriginal people, will begin to paint them. And we're anticipating we can produce between 100 and 200 doors a month on that principle, given a certain number of people working in it. Do you want to know what the demand is? And Ralph came to visit and said, I want one. The demand is so high that we have this list of 1,200 people, and this is only people just coming by inadvertently, saying, I want a door. How much money do I have to put down? So nascent here is a manufacturing industry for a peoples that needs it. that wants it, that is consistent with their cultural identity, that actually promotes their cultural values, that gives them the strength to feel that what their cultural values are doing for themselves and for their community is translatable. And then there's a market. It's good old capitalism at work. So what are the drivers? Let me run through this because this is extremely important. I've mentioned longevity as one driver of change, really significant driver of change. I haven't mentioned the rise of smart machines, although I mentioned Jibo. I hope they pay me for my advertising of Jibo. But I think that this is an issue I can't get into, but I can tell you that I'm obsessed with it. I think we've underestimated the impact of machines on our workplace. We have no idea what's coming. It's a tsunami. The level of efficiency that you can get from some of the robots that I've seen is so extraordinary. Now, I mean, you talk about Silicon Valley. What Google is working on with in robotics is unimaginable. It's so sophisticated. And these are robots that have the sensitivity and the capacity with touch to do what the human hand is able to do. They're dumb. They're still dumb, thank goodness. But this is a tsunami of change. Computational world, I've mentioned that, a profound driver of change. A new media ecology. So Shaw's, filming this. I hope you notice that this is very traditional filming. The camera sits there, gets the picture, focuses on the speaker, not on the listeners. It's okay. But this kind of ecology that we're talking about, this kind of new literacy that is being developed, this kind of extraordinary talent that our young people have, where they move at high warp speed between different forms of expression and different ways of understanding expression from different mediums and different ways of dealing with those media. All of that is a shift. It's not enough to say, oh my gosh, they're looking at Facebook too much. The question is, what is Facebook? Facebook is perhaps the best and most interesting manifestation of a 19th century phenomenon called the bulletin board, except it's just a bit faster and quicker. It's a bulletin board, and you share things on a bulletin board. That's how we shared things in the past. And by the way, we shared things all the time, even in the most repressed of contexts. This is the key, and this is something that I think would be fun to dialogue afterwards with Kerry about, which is, what are these new forms of organizations that we need to build? What do they look like? What does a new organization responsive and sensitive to all these nuances that I'm just talking about, what does it look like? It looks very different from traditional organizations. It's not top-down, it's not hierarchical, it's very flat. It listens carefully to the people who work in it. It listens very carefully to the people who depend upon it. It listens even more carefully to the communities that interact with it. It tries very hard to figure out what's happening, what's pulsing, what's actually moving. And it looks very, very carefully at its own data. It's data, but not data as an end in itself. It's not asking questions in surveys just to get answers. It's asking questions in surveys to get questions, to get more questions. It's a never-ending process of acquisition of knowledge. We're into something that is very hyper here and difficult for analysts and theorists and even practitioners to fully understand. But let me tell you, if organizations do not understand their base, they're gone. And Ralph and I know many institutions that are on the edge because of it, because they just pay no attention to their students, really, ironically, even though that's the majority of people in their institutions. And then finally, as a driver, it's this globally, you've heard this, that's cliche, got to be careful about it, but it is true. Very quickly, we may manufacture these doors. We know what's going to happen. The minute it looks really good, it'll move elsewhere as well. If it looks really, really good, it could be taken elsewhere. So how do you protect it? How do you work with it? How do you defend it? How do you actually, without closing it off, remaining open to the potential that may come if there are other ways of manufacturing it faster than we can actually engage with? And then I want to quickly talk, because I don't want to take too much time here, about the skills that are needed to navigate this rather complex landscape that I've been drawing for you. So here are some words that you may not see normally. I would defy anyone to find this in a policy document. If you find it in a policy document, I'll have my email address up at the end. I'd love to get that information. Without going through it, we're talking about design mindset. That's different from saying I'm a designer. It's about the most beautiful thing about design. The one lesson, if you can learn anything from what I've been saying to you, is design is about iterative prototyping. It's about testing, 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 working, testing, iterative over and over again until finally enough of the components and elements come out that you feel you've achieved an outcome. And we do this all the time, by the way, but we don't call it design, but yet we need to. We need to understand how it filters into and filtrates through how we work in every area. And then advancing, now, I'll do this. Let's see if it works. I did want to show you Jibo.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Cynthia. Happy birthday to you.
So, Jibo is interesting because in order for Jibo to be animated, they had to learn animation. In order for Jibo to be structurally manufactured, they had to learn something about industrial design. In order to think about human interaction with this robot, they had to think very carefully about shape and form, softness, for example. In order to make it available to children, they had to think about size. I could go on. The variables are in the thousands. All have been included in the development of this very early, very primitive type, and it's called a home robot. And you walk in, and you can look on the website, and you walk in, you say, hi, Jibo, and Jibo says, you've got a few messages. It's all very primitive. And yet, thousands have been sold. Thousands. An entirely new industry is being developed around home robotics. That's advancing innovation. Four other ones that I just want to mention to you. These are skills that without which I don't believe even the best of companies can survive today. And that is transdisciplinarity, which is the ability to cross all those silos and think across areas and think across disciplines and understand how they interact, look at them historically, look at them in the future. Social intelligence, which is the ability not to get upset when you get a comment that is really negative, but to understand that when you're involved in social media, people are not very nice. We're very nice here tonight, but, you know, I hate to tell you, it's a pretty murky world out there. What we're seeing is what the world is actually about. We're seeing angry people, happy people, loving people, hateful people. So social intelligence, the capacity to curate what it is you experience through the social media you go through, that curation is so important. The ability to critically interface and not take it emotionally. Now, it's not when it moves into sexism and racism and so on, then, you know, you're permitted to do whatever you like. But in that zone, that gray zone of silliness and stupidity, this is us. Hate to say it. And by just creating this alternative space and saying it's them, we're not recognizing what social intelligence we need to navigate in it. Cross-cultural competency is obvious. You know, the ability to understand other cultures. The coming change in demographics in Canada, we'll see multiple changes. Emily Carr has 50% of its students come from a variety of different Asian cultures. 10% of our students come from Indo-Canadian cultures. Only 25% of our students are Caucasian. I mean, that's such a tsunami of change that the faculty, quite rightly, are complaining because they have to develop that cross-cultural competency. I understand. It's difficult. And then, of course, computational thinking. I'm going to move quickly now because I'm at way over time. This is another set of skills, design mindset, again, repeated. Sense making. I just want to mention sense making to you. Have you heard of sense making? So sense making is this wonderful discipline that there are now 700 jobs being advertised in the United States in sense making, by the way. Anyone interested in working in sense making, go for it. This is the time. Sense making is this ability to discriminate and understand and actually get into the details of an issue and begin to look at it from a vision that understands complexity. So in understanding the core of complexity, you begin to actually sense all the wonderful and sometimes challenging narratives and variables that constitute any kind of situation that you're in. Novel and adaptive thinking speaks for itself. This is just a cluster of all those skills. I'm going to move quickly now. I just want to put this up very fast. It's a bit small. This is just some key emerging technologies. And, if you're talking about startups, if you're talking about economic change, and I think that you've got incredible people here that are poised to engage in that, then you've got to look at these industries. The difficulty that people like Ralph and I have is that, do you know that the classification system for jobs in Canada was last revised in 1957? If you go into the system and you take a look and you say, well, I haven't seen that job for a long, long time, and they still have stats attached to it. We have a system of classification of jobs that's so old that when people say there's a big gap in this or that, I don't know where they're getting the figures from. There clearly is a need for certain people in many different areas, and we need to understand that much, much better. But if we have a job classification system that doesn't have this as part of it, or doesn't have sense, I'd love it. Can you imagine if they put sense making in as one of the job classifications? This would be wonderful. This is our new campus in Prince George. Pray a new campus comes to Nanaimo, not to compete. Part of VIU. Got to be careful. This is the Wood Innovation Design Center. Just a quickie on that. It's a potentially dynamic and very exciting project, and we're bringing, essentially what we're doing in Prince George is bringing DIY culture to Prince George. It'll be about maker labs. We'll open it up and just let people play. This is the Venice Biennale, the Jeffrey Farmer. This is the project. Over 100,000 magazines cut up, and it's a much, much longer room than it looks. It's about the length of this room here, and you walk on all sides of it, and you're seeing an extraordinary explanation and visualization of the history of Canada. It's quite brilliant. These are the doors. And just as the cream on the cake, here's the new campus. So by the way, this is a private-public partnership. P3 it's called in the lingo of construction. One of the most difficult areas to navigate. I'm rentable on any P3 project needed if it's built. I can be rented physically and otherwise. Just views. So one of the key characteristics of this campus will be 12,000 square foot arts and culture plaza, public spaces, important, a 25 to 40,000 square foot public sitting around place. So we gave up tons and tons of potential building space because we felt, and we're in a part of Vancouver, it's right in your science world, we're in a part of Vancouver that we felt we needed to activate and bring the public in. And the public has to take ownership of it. We'd love to have a contest to name the various plazas. I don't think the city will let us, but we'll try. But the goal is that this particular one that you're seeing here, you can see the film projection. There's a $400,000 screen going in there. The goal is that that's a place where you can come and you can do your painting and drawing and be potentially guided if you wish. And then very quickly, just some interior renderings so that this is the cream on the cake. Has nothing to do with what I said before. Oh, yes, it does. The challenge of bringing together this project, a school with a $22 million a year budget, So understand, a very, very small school that is ranked 9th in the world in design, 9th in the world, competing against Royal College of Art, Art Institute of Chicago, Art Center, and do you know what their budgets are? 125 million minimum. The Zurich University of the Arts, which can barely produce one really good graduate, barely has a $140 million budget. In Canada, we take our institutions and we just don't let them grow to their potential. And I don't get it. This is the theater named. We raised $25 million, Emily Carr, more than our yearly budget to make this happen. This is the new gallery that we've built. This is the most important area, which is our Learning Commons. We've given over, out of the 335,000 square feet building, it's massive. We've given between 30 and 50, it's going to vary depending on the configuration, entirely over to the students. It's yours. You do with it as you wish. Okay, here's my email. Email me. Kerry, I took more of time than I anticipated. I apologize.
Now I'm going to call you Dr. Ron. It's just better. You know, my job is to come up and kind of synthesize what we were talking about. I can't even begin to. I mean, that was so fascinating. And, you know, the ideas are going to be bouncing around in my mind for weeks. The one thing I'm thinking is that we need an Emily Carr where entrepreneurs can just go and play with paint. And isn't that really what it's about? Because I think between our two talks, there were some similarities, you know. I talked a lot about crossing the boundaries of different sectors, you know, tech and arts, tech and foodie culture, that type of thing. And I think that's where the ideas come in. I love that Dr. Ron talked about design, you know, and the importance of it. I was always very, very inspired by the idea that Steve Jobs studied calligraphy. So, you know how beautiful Apple's products are. Now, maybe you're Samsung, but I can't leave Apple. I'm married to Apple as long as they continue making beautiful products. But he actually studied calligraphy. And design matters, and it matters more than ever. We are so tuned to design, and it's always amazed me how people will leave Canada. The very people who will argue against arts funding in Canada will leave Canada, go on their grand tours of Europe, and rave about the culture there. But you know what? There's a lot of money and value that is put into the culture there. Why do we have to cross oceans? In between journalism gigs, I ran a company, and we did a lot of work with architects in Victoria. You want to talk about a very frustrated population? They design, in some cases, incredibly beautiful, beautiful buildings, fabulous visionary buildings, and then we would sit and we would watch it, the vision being peeled back by city councils. You know, it was a shame. So I think we really need to, in Canada, embrace that kind of design thinking. I think the provincial government, in particular, and the Canadian government needs to get on with it. They need to recognize, they need to hear what you were saying tonight, because that's a huge part of what makes our cities vibrant. And when I talk about entrepreneurial culture, guess what? The young entrepreneurs, the millennials, they won't move to cities where culture is absent. That's like moving to a wasteland. And you know, coming back to Nanaimo and Vancouver Island and the idea of us being on the edge here, the possibility is before us. And I think this has been a really, really inspiring night listening to Dr. Ron. I'm fascinated to see where Nanaimo is going to go in its journey. You know, I actually kind of want to live here. You know, I don't know, maybe one day, you know, I really like Nanaimo. And I think we're ready for it. So thank you all for your time tonight. And thank you to Dr. Ron for the privilege of hearing you and giving me so much to think about. And I'll turn the podium over.
Well, I think we can all say that both speakers were very inspiring, and I agree with Kerry. I'll have to think about this for a while. I can't just come off the top of my head and say in any kind of a sentence what I've just heard, except for that I learned a lot. So we'd like to open up the floor to any questions for either speaker. Does anyone have a question? Yes, Kerry?
How do we create a culture of learning and vibrancy to foster and promote and build on the energy of entrepreneurialism, creativity of our youth, when we have educational structures that continue to replicate the roots of education as an institution of social control of the masses?
I
my
hope
God,
everybody
that's-
heard that question. There is a mic, there are mics to the side. I should have said that earlier. Did you
That's
guys hear the question?
Yes, yes. Let me turn the question around a bit. I actually think that the question, the way you pose the question is actually, you actually posed it in such a manner that you're actually supporting what you're criticizing. Because at the end of the day, part of the challenge is about context. And so the best place to learn is a context where you feel safe, where you feel that your maturity or even immaturity is respected. The best place to learn is where you actually can turn to someone you like or someone that you might like and feel that you can communicate with them. And we can't program that. You know, I think it's one of the greatest failures of our educational system is the idea that we produce our students. What we do is we create enough context, if we're good enough at it, for the students to produce themselves. The greatest students are the ones who graduate and say, I did that, I achieved that, because they have to own their achievement. And that, to me, is not about setting up a series of finite connective links in what ultimately becomes a chain. You know, I'm fond of saying to the faculty at Emily Carr, I don't understand where 3 hours came from. You know, we have these strange schedules. We put these people together for 3 hours and we say, learn. And I had a very poignant moment with a young student, a first-year student a couple of years ago, who came up to me, a real sweet guy, and he says, I need to talk to you. And I said, yeah, of course. And he said, we just don't learn this way. That's all he said. So we have segmented and structured things under the guise of programming the outcome, when the most beautiful thing that could happen is the unpredictability of the outcome. The joy that comes to someone that recognizes, wow, look at what I did, because I loved doing this, not because somebody said I should. It's the same with language. How do you learn a language? You learn it out of a deep sense of its importance to you. When you're told you have to learn it, you don't learn it. We all know that because all of us went to high school and learned how we didn't learn. I'm fond of saying that if we really want to, and it's no slam on the teachers, I think teachers are heroes. But high school put us in a position of such profound disempowerment about our own futures. It's changing, thankfully. A much more interesting generation has taken over the high school system in North America now than ever before, but they're so terribly underpaid. Anyway, the point about it is you can't program the outcome. I love the student who challenges the system, and as long as there's respect, as long as it's safe, as long as we can actually engage with it. And that student, by the way, generally speaking, is the one that starts the company. I can give you hundreds of examples. If we were to do a survey across Canada, you'd find that the students that owned the outcome of their own learning are the ones that take control of their futures.
So when I was talking about revolution, I actually wasn't kidding. I think once we're beyond the school, and I'm going to talk about moving into adulthood and entrepreneurialism and learning, you know, once we've reached the point where we want to bring that into our community, if the structures aren't working for us, then we move outside the structures. It doesn't work to sit in boardrooms with designated, I agree with you, facilitators for me. You know, if we want something to happen, then we meet in a pub. You know, we pick a place. A lot of great work happens in pubs, I have to tell you. you don't have to work within the structures of your community. It's your job to break down the walls, and you don't have to be obnoxious about it, or you could be, whatever. But move around those structures and think organically. Think ecosystem, you know? You don't have, there's no walls or anything. Be fluid with it. So even beyond, once you've gone through your younger learning and your university learning, keep learning and keep breaking down the structures.
Actually, what our organizing committee did is exactly what they're talking about. So we just came together and decided that we wanted to create a vision. That you're right, it doesn't happen immediately, and I think we're still working on what that vision is. But what I think we do know is that it comes from the community, it comes from individuals, and it's that entrepreneurial sense that will bring and help grow a healthy city. And I really do believe it's bottom up. I believe the best things come from individuals who decide to collaborate together to move things forward. I appreciate, of course, members of parliament, councils, mayors. We do need those individuals there desperately to help guide us, but it isn't up to them to make it all work for us. It's up to us to work with them and help move things forward. So the NEDC came up with a bit of a tagline, I think, for Nanaimo that we've adopted, and I quite like it. And we're calling it the Nanaimo Advantage. And so when I came to this city, I started to see so many things, and actually we are the largest city on Vancouver Island. Victoria is 70,000 and has 10 capital cities around it. But as a standalone city, we are the largest city on the island, and we should embrace that and you know, with passion. And so the Nanaimo Advantage really is about, obviously, everyone in this room is passionate. Everybody I meet in Nanaimo is passionate. When I came here from California, and I never knew people like this in my life. I've never known people like you that care, that talk, that hug, that smile, that greet. And when I was the publisher of the Nanaimo Daily News, and we did those series of Ask Why You Came to Move Here, the same thing happened over and over again. People would say, well, people here are so friendly. And I know people from Victoria always say that. People in Nanaimo are very friendly. So certainly that's one of the Nanaimo advantages, is how friendly we are. We have great weather. We certainly can't argue that. We are a harbor city. We have a conference center that is beautiful. We are a transportation hub with ferries and float planes and a helijet and a beautiful airport that's just about ready to hit its 2 millionth passenger in a very short period of time, which is astounding that we can fly anywhere from there. We have the Port Authority with deep sea ports and a navigation system that is beyond anything else in the country or the world as I understand it. We have VIU University. I mean, how many places can boast that they have their own university? This is huge and significant. And I don't know if you saw our mascot out front. The Mariners, go Mariners. Like, we have our own sports team and mascot. And that university job force is 2,300 people. We have a state-of-the-art emergency room at Regional Hospital. That's huge. I've been in it because I garden, and I seem to hurt myself constantly when I garden. I have no idea why. But anyway, I've used it several times. We have arts and culture, which is a huge economic driver, as you heard already. We have the Port Theatre. We have our very own symphony. We're very, very lucky here that we have our own symphony. We have Theatre One and Crimson Dance. We have the Diana, we breed talent here with Diana Krall and the Jenkins sisters. We have affordable housing. Everybody's now discovering that, and we still have affordable housing. We have beautiful nature surrounding us. We have more parks, I think, than most cities, 220 some odd parks. So I would encourage you, when you talk to people, talk about the Nanaimo Advantage, use that term, and let people know what that Nanaimo Advantage is. Again, I'd like to thank our speakers, thank all of our exhibitors, thank the organizing committee, and thank all of you for coming out. Have a good evening.